All right, let's dive into today's deep dive. We're looking at Solar91 Cleantech Limited.
An Indian solar energy company.
Oh, yeah, based in Jaipur.
And focused on those turnkey solutions for commercial and industrial clients.
Basically handling it all.
From A to Z.
But the real buzz is their IPO, going public on the Bombay Stock Exchange, the SME platform.
Big news.
So we'll unpack everything about Solar91, the industry itself, solar energy as a whole, and what this IPO could mean for investors.
Well, what's really interesting here is that they're not just installing panels. They've got this whole multifaceted approach. Project development, construction, long-term operations.
They've got their hands full.
Yeah.
But let's rewind a bit. Solar91, back to 2015, right? Originally Solar91 Cleantech Private Limited.
Right.
And now they're a major player in the Indian solar scene.
And a lot of that is thanks to their leadership, IIT graduates, strong engineering, tech background.
Yeah, that adds a lot of credibility. And you see it in their milestones. Like 2018, their first full EPC project. That's engineering, procurement, and construction in Uttar Pradesh, handling every single stage of the project.
A one-stop shop makes going solar much easier.
Totally. And that same year, they get credit support from the government.
Yeah.
The CGTMSE fund, right?
Not just financial backing, but also a sign of trust.
Like a stamp of approval.
And then 2019, going international, a rooftop project in Kenya, shows they're thinking big.
Yeah, consistent growth makes this IPO even more interesting. Speaking of, let's zoom out, talk about the solar energy industry as a whole.
Yeah.
It's more than just like a feel-good story.
It's booming.
Huge market, India and globally.
Projections are massive. Solar EPC market could hit almost $288 billion by 2028. Compound annual growth rate of 5.6%.
Wow, that's huge. So what's fueling this, not just people going green?
Well, environmental concern is definitely a part of it. People are worried about climate change, looking for alternatives. But the economics are also key. Technology's made solar much more cost-effective.
We saw that, right? Late 2023, costs in India for large-scale projects, they dropped by over 25% in just 1 year.
Exactly. And that, combined with government programs, incentives, it makes adopting solar super attractive.
Right. So in India specifically, the government wants 500 GW of renewable energy capacity by 2030. A big chunk of that will be solar.
Huge push. This is a long-term trend.
And definitely not a fad. So Solar91 seems well-positioned to ride this wave.
They're part of a global movement towards sustainability, and it's only getting bigger.
Now let's get into their specific approach. How do they make money? What sets them apart?
Two main revenue streams. First, the classic EPC model. They're the developers, the contractors, design, equipment, construction, all of it.
So they get paid for their expertise in executing these projects.
Right. But what's really unique is their second stream, the independent power producer model, IPP.
Break that down for me. What does being an IPP even mean?
So instead of just building for others, they develop, own, and operate their own power plants.
Wow, so they become energy producers themselves.
Through subsidiary companies.
So they make money by selling that electricity to the distribution companies.
Or the systems. Yeah.
So they're involved in both the development side and the energy generation.
A diverse approach.
That's smart. And they've got some cool projects, right?
Yeah.
Like the one with the PM Kusum scheme in Rajasthan.
Yeah, a government initiative providing solar pumps for farmers, reduces reliance on diesel, good for agriculture. Solar91's developing over 157 milli-WW under that scheme.
That's a big contribution. Not just megawatts, but social impact too.
Exactly. They're not just building plants, they're empowering communities, promoting cleaner energy.
Right, so history, ambition, commitment. Now the real talk, the financial.
It gets interesting.
This is what matters to investors. So what's the story with their numbers?
Really positive, strong performance, especially lately. Revenue from operations, almost 14% growth last fiscal year, shows healthy demand.
That's solid growth in a competitive market. But are they profitable? Actually making money?
Oh, yeah. Their profit after tax, the PAT, increased by over 1,181% last year.
Whoa, that's a huge jump. What's causing that?
Partly external factors like the lower solar module prices we talked about, but also their own efficiency, cost control.
Running a tight ship.
And this shows how confident the founders are. The average cost of acquisition per equity share for them is nil.
Okay, so lots of positive signs. But before we get too excited, let's look at their order book. What's in the pipeline?
The order book, that's the confirmed contracts, future projects, theirs is quite substantial. Healthy pipeline across different states in India.
So not just one-off projects, they've got steady business lined up.
Diversification is good, reduces reliance on one market, helps with risk management.
Makes sense. Strong track record, good financials, healthy pipeline. They seem to be checking all the boxes.
So far, so good.
But let's be real. every investment has risks.
Of course, nothing's guaranteed.
So with Solar91, what are some of the potential downsides investors should be aware of?
Well, one of the biggest ones is government policies. The solar industry relies heavily on those incentives regulations.
And those can change.
Exactly. What if the government scales back subsidies or tightens regulations? That could hurt their projects, their profits.
So got to keep an eye on the political landscape.
Always. It's like checking the weather before a hike. Be prepared.
Right. So that's one risk. What else?
Competition. The solar industry is attracting a lot of players, some with deep pockets.
It's a hot market. Everyone wants in.
Domestic and international players. Solar91's not just competing with startups, they're up against global giants.
So they need to stay innovative.
Absolutely. It's survival of the fittest, even in a growing market.
And that brings us to execution. Building these large-scale solar projects, it's not easy.
It's complex. Potential for delays, cost overruns, unexpected problems.
Supply chain issues, permitting, even the weather.
All of that can impact the project, the profits, the investor returns.
So even though Solar91 is a good track record, investors need to consider, can they manage all of this as they grow?
Very important point. And then there's the operational risks, accidents, incidents at the project sites,
Things happen, even with safety measures.
equipment malfunctions, natural disasters. These things can disrupt operations, lead to losses.
So how prepared is Solar91 for these situations?
That's what investors need to look at. Insurance, contingency plans, safety protocols.
All right, so we've covered policies, competition, execution, operational risks. Anything else?
One more, often overlooked, market volatility.
The stock market, always unpredictable.
This IPO is generating excitement, but that doesn't mean the share price will just skyrocket.
Up, down, who knows? So many factors at play.
It's crucial to know your own risk tolerance, your investment goals.
Don't follow the crowd. Make informed decisions that fit your situation.
Absolutely. We've highlighted the downsides, but every investment has some risk.
That's the game. So do your research, weigh the risks and rewards, then decide.
Knowledge is power. Informed investors are empowered investors.
Well said. So company, industry, potential risks. Now the big question, what about this IPO specifically?
Let's dig into those details next. All right, welcome back to our deep dive into Solar91.
We've covered a lot, haven't we? Their journey, the solar industry, the potential risks.
Now let's get to what you're all waiting for, the IPO itself.
Yeah, the details, what it could mean for investors.
Okay, so IPO opens December 24th, 2024, closes on the 27th.
Just before the new year, that's a tight window.
It is. And the issue size, it's substantial. They're aiming to raise a significant lakhs.
Shows they're serious about growth. But how will they use the funds?
Good question. They've outlined three main areas: investments in their subsidiaries, working capital, and then general corporate purposes.
Let's break those down. Subsidiaries, we know they're big on that IPP model, owning their own power plants. So expanding that side of the business.
Exactly. A big chunk of the IPO money goes to those subsidiaries, boosting their capacity to develop and operate more plants.
So scaling up energy production, getting a bigger piece of the renewable energy pie.
Right. Part of their long-term strategy, going from just a service provider to a real player in the energy landscape.
Ambitious, but could be very profitable.
For sure. Now, working capital, essential for any company that's growing.
Keeps the lights on.
Day-to-day expenses, inventory, cash flow, and with their expansion plans, they'll need a lot of it.
The IPO gives them that cushion.
Exactly. Then there's the general corporate purposes.
That's a bit broad.
It covers all sorts of things: admin costs, legal stuff, marketing, R&D, the things you need to run and grow a company.
The behind-the-scenes stuff.
Exactly. So those are the three buckets: subsidiaries, working capital, general corporate needs. But what about the price?
How's that decided? What can investors expect?
They'll use a process called book building.
For those who aren't, stock market experts, what is that exactly?
It's how they figure out the price. Big investors, institutional investors, they submit bids saying what price and how many shares they'll buy.
So kind of like an auction?
Right. And that sets the price range. They announce it in the newspapers at least 2 days before the IPO opens.
Transparency is good.
Everyone gets to see the price, decide if it works for them before the IPO starts.
Makes sense. What about for us regular investors?
The minimum bid lot for this IPO is Dine equity shares.
So that's the least you can buy.
Right. And remember, you might not get all the shares you ask for. It depends how many people want in.
Supply and demand, like concert tickets.
Exactly. So we've got the timeline, the money they're raising, what they'll use it for, the price, the minimum bid lot.
Lots of info.
We've covered a lot.
But what about their strategy going forward? Where do they go from here?
Their main focus is two things: expanding their projects and those subsidiaries.
Okay, expanding projects, what does that mean exactly?
More solar projects in India, maybe even internationally.
Thinking big.
Taking advantage of the growing demand, becoming a global player.
Makes sense. And the subsidiaries, how do they fit in?
Remember, those are mostly focused on the IPP model.
Yeah.
Owning and running the power plants.
Right.
Investing in them means more plants, more stable income.
A balanced portfolio, different revenue streams.
Strategic approach to growth, using what works, finding new opportunities.
Sounds like a good plan. But even the best plans can go wrong. We talked about some risks, policies, competition.
Those are important. But let's take a closer look at those and some other challenges investors should be aware of.
Let's get into it.
Yeah.
Because knowledge is power, especially when it comes to investing.
Absolutely. So those risks, they can be complex, even when things look promising. Government policies, we talked about that, a big factor.
What if those incentives disappear?
Exactly. Subsidies go down, regulations get tougher, suddenly their projects aren't so profitable anymore.
Gotta stay informed.
Always. Like I said, check the weather before you hike.
Good advice. Okay, so policies. What about competition? Lots of players out there.
And getting more competitive all the time. Domestic companies, international companies, all wanting a piece of the Indian market.
Solar91's not just competing with small players anymore.
They're up against the big guys, so they have to innovate, stand out, stay ahead of the game.
It's a tough business.
It is. And then there's execution, like we said, these big solar projects. They're not easy.
A lot can go wrong.
Delays, costs go up, unexpected problems, supply chains, permits, even the weather.
Like building a house, but way more complicated.
All of that affects the project, the profits, the investors. Solar91's done well so far, but can they keep it up as they get bigger?
That's the question.
And don't forget those operational risks.
Things that can happen, even when you're careful.
Equipment breaking down, natural disasters, these things can stop everything, cost money.
So are they prepared? Insurance, plans, safety procedures, all of that.
Investors need to ask those questions. How do they manage risk? What happens when things go wrong?
Okay, so policies, competition, execution, operations. What else?
Last one, market volatility.
The stock market. Never know what's going to happen.
This IPO is exciting, but no guarantee the share price will go up.
It's a gamble.
You need to know how much risk you're comfortable with, what your goals are.
Don't just follow the hype. Make your own decisions.
Every investment has risk, but you can manage it. Do your research, weigh the pros and cons, then decide.
So much good advice today.
Yeah.
Knowledge is power.
Exactly. Informed investors, they make the best decisions.
Okay, so company, industry, IPO details, risks. We've covered a lot.
We have. But before we finish, let's step back for a minute. What does this IPO tell us about the bigger picture?
The future of solar renewable energy. That's a big question.
And we'll get into that when we come back.
All right, welcome back to the deep dive. We've gone deep with Solar91 Cleantech Limited, their whole story, this IPO on the horizon.
And now I think it's time to, step back, see this IPO in the context of the whole renewable energy sector. What does it tell us?
Well, it definitely shows how much solar energy is growing. Remember those numbers, almost $288 billion market by 2028. This isn't a small thing anymore.
Not at all. It's a global trend, driven by a bunch of things all happening at once. People care about the environment, governments are supporting it, and technology's making solar cheaper and better.
It's the perfect time for this industry. And Solar91's right there in the middle of it. This IPO, it's a signal to investors. This sector is full of opportunity.
Exactly. And I think this IPO also highlights something else, the rise of ESG investing.
I've heard that term, but what does it actually mean for the average person?
ESG, environmental, social, and governance. It's how some people invest these days. They're not just looking at profits.
Right.
They're looking at a company's impact on the environment, how they treat people, how well they're run.
So like investing with your values.
Yeah, putting your money where your heart is. And a company like Solar91, clean energy, helping rural communities, that's attractive to ESG investors.
Makes sense. Do good. And maybe make some money too.
Exactly. And we can't forget about innovation. Solar's always changing, new technology all the time.
Better panels, new ways to store energy, how we integrate it into our lives.
It's a constant evolution, and companies like Solar91 have to keep up.
Adapt or die, right? Speaking of which, that IPP model they're using, becoming energy producers themselves, that seems pretty innovative.
It is. It shows a bigger trend, I think. Vertical integration.
Mhm.
Companies want to control more of the whole process, from making the panels to selling the energy.
So it's not just about the panels anymore.
Nope. It's about owning a bigger piece of the renewable energy future.
I see. So we've covered a lot, and I'm sure our listeners are thinking, okay, should I invest in this IPO?
Well, we've given you a lot of information, but the decision is yours. Renewable energy, especially solar, it's got potential. But remember, there are always risks.
And we talked about those. Policies changing, competition, those execution challenges. Weigh the risks and the reward.
Absolutely. Do your own research, talk to a financial advisor, make sure it fits your goals, your risk tolerance.
Don't follow the hype, follow the facts.
Informed investors, they make the best choices.
Well said. And that's a wrap on our deep dive into Solar91 Cleantech Limited. The future of solar, the future of energy.
Thanks for joining us.
Hope you learned something.
Yeah.
Whether you're an expert or just starting out, keep learning, keep asking questions. Until next time.